Hi, I'm Billy Keels, the host of the Going Long podcast. Every week, I'm going to be here interviewing the absolute best in the business as it relates to real asset investing, as well as real Main Street investors. We're going to be having conversations where you can listen in, and that's going to help you to continue on your path to education so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident in investing long distance. So make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you're liking it as well, because that way you can get every single episode as soon as it comes out. And by the way, don't forget to leave today's episode a 5-star review. Let's go ahead and listen to today's conversation. Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. I'm your host, Billy Keels. And if you've ever wanted to know how to transition from single family residences to self-storage success, then guess what? Today's the conversation that I'm pretty sure you're going to want to listen to until the very, very last word, because today's guest got started in residential real estate, wholesaling and acquiring single family residences. Then he was followed up by going into the multifamily experience. And you know what? He got a bit fed up with tenant-friendly laws. And so then he pivoted into self-storage, which is something that we're going to learn a lot about because it's fantastic. Today, with a lot less tenants and over 260,000 square feet of self-storage portfolio, and it probably has grown since then, he's happier than he's ever been in his entire life. And he wants to share with you how you also can transition from single family residences and understand and learn more about the self-storage space so that you can find much more fulfillment in your life. And it brings me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation the Senior Managing Partner of Titan Wealth Group, Mr. Fernando Angelucci. Hey, Fernando, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Billy. Thanks for having me today.
Hey, you know what? It's such a pleasure to be able to speak with you and get to learn a lot more from you today. I know here we've talked a lot about multifamily and we've talked some about self-storage, and you've been able to tie this together and really be able to live a fulfilled life as a result of it. So I'm sure that we're going to learn so much from you today. And you know what, Fernando, as you know, I love to ask everybody at least the same 5 questions. We're going to get 2 in the beginning. We're going to get 3 kind of there at the end. And then in the middle, well, you and I are just going to get to know you and learn more about your experience and how you're helping to positively impact other people's lives. So to get us started, help us understand, where is it that you live in the United States?
Yeah, I'm from Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago, that town near those, I think those 5 Great Lakes and stuff like that, which is a fantastic place, one that I like a lot myself. So thank you very much. So also to help us understand, what is the most positive thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours?
Yeah, actually, this is perfect timing. We just got an unsolicited offer on one of our ground up developments outside of Chicago. So we were planning on holding that asset for about 5 years. And we just got an offer right before year 1.
Wow. Fantastic. So I know not only will you be happy, but it sounds like a lot of your probably investors will be happy about that as well. Sure. That's a lot of good news. So thanks for sharing that with us. And Fernando, listen, I tried as much as I could, like in 15 seconds or whatever I give myself, to give the audience a much more high-level view about you, your experience, some of the things that you've done, and why they want to continue to listen to our conversation even more today. But it's almost impossible because you've done like a lot of stuff. So could you do us a favor, Fernando? Could you help us to understand more about you and your backstory? And also, if you could take also a couple seconds and help us to understand maybe some of the major decision points that you had to make to get to this point in your journey. And then from there, you and I will see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the headline I always tell people is I'm up to $50 million in self-storage transactions. I've done those in the last 3 years, all before I turned 30 years old. And so let's back up to show you kind of how I got here. So I'm the son of 2 immigrants from Brazil, born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. And when I first started on my career path, if you will, my parents always had that old school American dream for me, right? Go to school, get good grades, go get a great job at a company and retire with a pension 40 years later. But when I was 16 years old, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I realized that the path for me was actually going to be a business owner and more specifically a real estate investor. So from there, I started in the single family space with the little money that I had. I think I had maybe $2,000 when I first started. Started flipping single family homes and acquiring those as rentals. Started trading up into larger multifamily properties. And I was thinking I was doing what, I read in the book. And it got to the point where I was still having a bunch of headaches with tenants, toilets, and trash, even with third-party management companies. So I started looking for another avenue. And that's when I stumbled across self-storage. And I can cover some of the reasons why I like self-storage here shortly. But once I got into the space and I bought my very first facility, it was a very small facility, maybe $1 million, 17,000 square feet. I was sold. I was completely bought in. So I sold all of my multifamily, all of my single family, all the residential holdings I had, and then focused 100% into storage. And I think one of the reasons that I've experienced a lot of success recently is by deciding to hyper focus on one asset as opposed to trying to spread my time over multiple assets, and as opposed to being a master of none, being kind of mediocre at all of them.
Wow. And I like when you talk about focus, right? Because as you talk about focus, you mentioned a couple of things that, and I guess this is probably more of an emotional question that I have for you, because so there's this focus element on one side, there's this other side, which is parents, or you have parents that were immigrants to the United States that bought into that American dream, and you were, go to school, get a good job, and move up the corporate ladder, I guess is probably the way that it is the way that it's sold to us. So, right. And then at 16, your whole life, like I can't even imagine what would have happened to me if I would have read Rich Dad Poor Dad at 6. Well, first of all, at 16, I probably wouldn't have even read the book because I was just doing so many different things. But at 16, the fact that you had that book impact your life is amazing. But I'm curious as to what happened when you had the conversation with your parents who were bought into this American dream that you were really going to start doing something else. Because that for me is a mindset thing. And those types of conversations, I'm going to assume, are not very easy ones, but I'd love for you to share what that was like for you with me and the Going Long family.
Yeah. So there was actually two distinct time periods that I remember having kind of these tough conversations. The first time was when I told my dad I wanted to go into real estate investing and I didn't know if college was right for me. And he basically responded with, over my dead body. He did encourage me to go to school and get my degree. He kind of gave me the Henry Ford response, which was, you can have, any color as long as it's black. He basically said you can get any degree as long as it ends in the words engineering. Right. So I did end up going to University of Illinois and graduating with an engineering degree. But immediately, right when I got out, I was working for a Fortune 50 company and started doing the investing on the side. And within 6 months, I realized that I was going to be able to replace my income. I stayed there for another 6 months. I was around month 12 or month 13. And that's when I finally gave my notice that I was going to leave and do this full time. And that was a tough conversation to have with my father. He was very concerned.
I'm just listening to you, Fernando, and I'm thinking, what was this guy? I mean, because if your dad took the Henry Ford kind of approach, and so you did it, but then after 12 months, you're like, I'm out of here. So sorry, I cut you off, but I'm just doing. I want to know what this emotion was like, and I know all the Going Long family is like, oh my gosh, what is this all about?
Yeah. So, I basically made it in his eyes, right? I was working at a Fortune 50 company. I had a 401k match. I had a pension. I had a truck. I had a, expense account. I mean, I had the whole deal. But I just wasn't happy. Every day it was like, I dreaded going to work, and it was a good paying job. But at the end of the day, I was building someone else's financial dream as opposed to mine. So when I quit, I mean, there was some tensions between me and my father, but very shortly after that, maybe a year or two, and he saw kind of the success unfolding in front of him, then he finally, kind of jumped on board. But you know how it is as a father, all you want is the best for your child, and you're going to do what you think is best based off the experiences that you have. Yeah. And so for me to show him this whole other world that he had never had experience to, it's kind of offsetting at first, but then now he sees his success and he's really proud of me.
So this is interesting. We're going to come back to this, but during that 4 years that you were studying engineering, you'd already been influenced by Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? So yeah, you're going through college. Didn't you have the word that I'm looking for, but didn't you have like this desire to play in real estate in the summertime, or were you not tempted to go and look at real estate because you didn't really even want to go to college. You were just doing it because this was what you wanted to make sure that, well, I guess maybe not ruffle any feathers at the beginning, but didn't you have that temptation during those 4 years?
Yeah, I did. And I actually acted on that temptation. So all throughout college, all I did was absorb books on real estate. I remember very distinctly, one of my business partners now, who was a roommate of mine in college, there was a Friday night and he came in the room and said, "Hey, we're going to go to a party." And I was reading a book on, I think it was called Tax-Free Wealth. And it was basically a book on taxes. And he just looked at me with like this crazy look on my face, just like, "What are you doing?"
It's
throughout that time.
Man.
Yeah. So, throughout that time, I'd go to seminars, I'd go to, property showings, I'd go to these webinars that they had thrown on. And then I also started my first kind of adjacent to real estate business. I started a residential painting company. And that's kind of how I got my first foray into sales and buying properties and negotiation, running employees, all while I was 19 years old. So from there, then I really started to scale. And once I got out of college and I had some disposable income, then I started buying properties.
Okay. And what motivated you to start the painting company?
Yes, I was in a physics class waiting for the class to start. And a guy came in and said, "Hey, who would like to make 10 grand this summer and learn business skills?" So I raised my hand. And then that summer I kind of shattered a couple of the records that the company had. My mentor was amazing. And he taught me just all the things. He gave me basically the foundation of being a business owner with having this guidance of mentors that has done it before me. So it was such a wonderful learning experience for me.
So I love that, man. And there's a number of questions that I do want to ask, but we don't get an opportunity to really speak to people that had at a very young age this clarity that it seems that you had, right? And I'm really curious because this is like almost juxtaposed because in your household you were told to kind of follow the American dream, go do this, and then you read this book, and then things were happening. But what do you think? What contributed to this clarity at such a young age for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost by luck. I was given the book Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was 16 years old by a teacher of mine, and that's kind of what started it. And as I was reading that book, one of the things that Robert Kiyosaki talks about is to surround yourself with great teams. And the more people that you surround yourself with that know what they're doing, that knowledge starts to kind of infuse into you. So by joining all of these, seminars and webinars and, going to these real estate investment association meetups, I was getting exposed to people that were 20, 30, 40 years ahead of me in the real estate game. And it really helped me accelerate along the path. One of the things I always love to say is, I'm not here because of my own merits. I'm here because I stand on the shoulders of giants. And the easiest way to get ahead in life is, instead of you failing, learn from other people's failures so that you don't have to go through that. And it shortens that learning curve substantially.
Yeah, and you're going to get a chance to share and help people do the exact same thing, as you know, before we finish here. And one of the things that I like about that whole concept of learning from others is you're not going to make, or hopefully you shouldn't make, the exact same mistakes that they made. You're going to make your own mistakes, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's part of the process. If you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing the envelope far enough, or you're not going outside of your comfort zone. If you don't make mistakes, then chances of you advancing are pretty slim to none. But if you can avoid a lot of the obvious mistakes that people have been doing over and over and over, well, yeah, do what Fernando's just mentioning and surround yourself with people that are out there. So listen, so we're talking a lot about what you've done, and you had that conversation after a year of working, and if you can help just close the loop on this part of the conversations, because I think a lot of times people are afraid to have these types of conversations with their family members. They're not always easy. Sometimes they're really, really difficult, and sometimes they're not nice at all. But after a year of working, then you had to have that next conversation with your dad again, right? And so you had that conversation, but what was it that really made him realize, you know what? Even if Fernando doesn't use his degree, I think he's still going to be okay.
Yeah, so it was actually a couple years later. I'd come back to Chicago to visit my parents, and I told them I had to do a little bit of work before I could come and stay and chat with them. And I was at the dining room table, and I was writing checks to my equity investors. I mean, there was like 14 or 16 checks on the table. And he's like, what are those checks? I'm like, oh, I'm paying my investors their profits. And he's like, well, where's my check? I was like, you didn't invest in my deal, you know? So, so that was a time where I think it really clicked for him, is when he saw like, hey, not only is Fernando making profits, but he's making enough profits that he could pay his investors profits as well. Maybe there's something to this that is actually working out for him, you know?
You know what? It's amazing what happens when people actually start seeing the financial. I mean, I'm laughing only because I've been there, right? And so it is amazing. People can say, oh, yeah, this is you shouldn't be doing this or that, or, well, you know what, I think you'll be okay. But the belief and the buy-in starts happening when they start seeing the checks.
Right. Show me the money, right?
Show me the money. Can we do this? How can we get involved? You're like, wait, you didn't want to be involved in this before. Anyway, so thank you for sharing that, because a lot of times it is the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Let's get to your actual the real estate stuff. So you find eventually you get in and you're doing your single family residences, and if you could take us through that really quickly, because I want to get to what you really love. But
right,
why the single family, and kind of what was the reason that you were like, this is not working for me. I got to get rid of all this stuff.
So I started in the single family space because that was what I had the capital for. I wanted to jump right into commercial, but I didn't have really that much money when I began. I was 23 years old, just come out of college. So, you know, a lot of my funds had been spent on that. Mm-hmm. So I bought my first single family home. It was like $40,000. And from there, I kind of caught the bug. I did a couple of rehab projects. I wholesaled a lot of properties that didn't make sense for me. And then very quickly, once I built a little bit of a kind of war chest together, then I started buying multifamily. My first multifamily property was a 5-unit property in let's call it a Class D area, very rural area of Iowa. And I learned a lot of lessons on that deal. Still made money, not as much as I thought I was going to make, but I learned kind of the real side of real estate. You know, there's that 20% you read in a book or you read in webinars that, hey, I think I know how to do this, but then the other 80% you learn from actually doing it itself. So as I learned and I started building more multifamily and buying more multifamily units, you know, I looked at my week and I realized like I'm working 50, 60 hours a week. I thought this was supposed to be passive income. And that is not how I felt. The word passive had never been what I felt when I was holding these things. So then I started looking at, you know, what is taking up my time, even with third-party managers. Why am I spending so much time on this that is not acquisition related, right? Just the maintenance and stuff. So at that point, I realized it came down to one thing, came down to people. If I can eliminate people from my investments, it makes it a lot easier to run. And that's when I found self-storage.
Yeah, I'm laughing. So we'll have to talk about this because I've fallen. We've started doing a lot more accredited investors, 506Cs for large pieces of energy equipment.
Yeah,
and when we're investing in this energy equipment, it's pretty much you have to maintain the equipment and make sure that the equipment works. And there is a lot less of the resident interaction and things like that. So, however, there's always a human interaction, right? That's always one of the things that's interesting and important. But as you see the two of us kind of smiling and laughing, so you've come to this realization, you're like, all these different things are going on. You're working all these hours and you were looking for passive investment and passive income, which are two different things, as you know. And so then you find you need to pivot. You could have pivoted anywhere, Fernando. I mean, you were in the tangible asset space. You could have done, I don't know, anything, mobile home parks or I don't know, or buy huge portfolios or whatever. Why in the world did you decide, like you've started talking a little bit about it, but why self-storage to double down, to focus, to become the expert instead of something else?
Right. So my very first criteria, again, was I wanted to get out of habitation real estate. Because the problem with habitation real estate, in my opinion, is that there's always this not only expressed warranty of habitation, but also implied warranty of habitation. And that's where things go wrong. A furnace goes out, you get a leak in the roof, and it becomes an emergency right there. This is not something you could push off a couple of weeks to handle when you have more time. You have to drop everything you're doing. You have to cut your flow and go pay attention to that. So immediately that, you know, single family is out, multifamily is out, mobile homes is out. all that was really left after that was kind of self-storage, data centers, industrial properties to a certain degree, energy infrastructure. Now, energy, I don't have $50 million as a 25-year-old just sitting around to just buy a power plant, right? So that was out immediately. And then where it really clicked after I was down to those last three categories was I went to a real estate expo in Indianapolis in the Midwest. And I was walking from presentation to presentation, and I got into a presentation a little bit late, and the guy speaking said, no tenants, no toilets, no trash. And I was like, ears perked up. I went beeline to the front row, sat right in the front row. And then from there, it was kind of history. I immediately went back to all my partners and said, listen, we're exiting residential real estate, habitation real estate. Let's sell everything over the next 2 to 3 years. Make sure we're doing it in a smart way instead of fire sailing. But then we sold all of our single family. We sold all of our multifamily, and then we started purchasing self-storage. And we started small. Like I said, our first facility was only 17,000 square feet.
Okay. And I was going to say, how was that? Because once again, you're in these conversations where, hey, listen, we've got this business that's going, it's profitable business. Maybe there's a lot of moving parts, but you go to this thing, you have this like boom illumination, and you go back to your team and you're like, we're selling everything. They're probably looking at you like, hang on a second, Fernando, we just built this profitable business.
Right.
Yeah, I know you started small, but what was the first reaction for that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a little bit of an alarm, but the way that my company is set up, we modeled it after the book Traction by Gino Wickman, which talks about the EOS system. I always have a visionary and an integrator. I happen to be the visionary of my company. Gotcha. So what my role is to come up with 20 new ideas per week, knowing that the integrator is going to shoot down 19 of them per week, and maybe one will last per week, right? Yeah. So I made my case. I showed him all of my analytics. The weird thing about me as a visionary is I'm also very good with numbers. I'm a very detail-oriented person, which is not typical for visionary types.
Usually not.
So I just showed him, all of the information. Said, listen, look at all the headaches that we've experienced over the last 6 months. All of those would be eliminated by switching into self-storage. Look at the leverage that's available. And these are some of the topics I'll touch here momentarily. Why, the 9 reasons why I chose self-storage over multifamily and single family. And he said, you know what? We've gotten this far and you haven't steered me wrong yet. Let's try it out. And so we actually bought our first self-storage facility before we sold the last half of our portfolio, just in case things didn't work out as we thought. We still had at least the cream of the crop. So we started selling our portfolio from the bottom up. The lower performers we started selling first, so that the very last things we had to sell were our top performers.
Got it. Okay. And it's a risk mitigation. You're trying something new. You're getting into a new subsection of the asset class, if you will, and you are doing what you're supposed to do as a visionary, right? And so that makes a lot of sense in terms of the way that as that kind of fell through, or as it laid itself out. So, Fernando, you're here on the Going Long podcast. Remember, when we talked about people feeling comfortable and confident investing beyond their backyard. So I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, not at 16, many years later. And then I got hooked, and I read, like you talked about Tax-Free Wealth. I read that one, Tom Wheelwright, and I read all of them, right? I read all of their books. And then I started reading other books, more and more. And the thing that I started recognizing was all these books that seemed that they were saying, hey, you know what, buy this property, live in there, be the landlord, be in your same place, and you can go check the properties and da-da-da. Whether they said it expressly or it was kind of like implicitly talked about in the book, it was like, buy the property, go check on the property, make sure this and that.
Right.
And so we're kind of taught to buy where we live. Now, I fundamentally believe that does not have to be the case, because I've been living in Europe for the last 6.5 years. Well, a lot longer than that, but I've been investing in real estate almost 7 years now. And I've never actually been in the same place of an asset that I own. So with that being stated, I also you mentioned Iowa earlier, when we talked earlier in Ohio, and you did mention that you live in Chicago. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious as to why someone who is a business owner and continues to build a business and expand and grow, why in the world would you think about investing long distance or building a business that invests long distance, which is doing something that goes pretty much against what most of the books tell us we need to do as real estate investors?
Yeah. So one of the things I think is a flaw with that style of mentality is, what if you live in a area that is not favorable to invest in the asset that you want? Maybe you're in a high tax location. Maybe the population demographics do not make sense for what you're wanting to do. You're going to limit yourself extremely, and you're going to limit your growth. So what I think is important is, as opposed to investing in your backyard, is to set up systems and processes around the way you invest, put safeguards in place. So it doesn't matter where you go. You can go to where the best opportunity is. So that's exactly what we did with self-storage. When I was testing the model, if you will, air quotes, I bought a facility that was about 2.5 miles away from my home. I'm sorry, 2.5 hours away from my home. That was close enough that if something did go wrong, I could go check on it. But the way I treated that investment was that every time I needed to go to it, I pretended like I had to basically jump on a plane and travel for 6, 8, 10 hours. And by approaching it that way, I was able to set up a system and a process that allowed me to invest in assets. Half of the assets I've purchased, I have never physically seen personally. Myself have not seen. I've hired third parties. I've hired, consultants to go take a look at it. Yep. And so once we got those systems in place, then all of a sudden my investments started exploding, because I was able to go to the markets that were amazing, right? The North and South Carolinas, the Tennessees, the South, the Southeast, the Southwest, as opposed to where I am. Chicago's a wonderful place to live. It's got great culture, great food, but the taxes are really tough. The laws are extremely tenant friendly. So I don't want to own anything here. I want to go to the places where it makes sense to be a real estate investor. And after we bought our first one and set up those processes, within the next year and a half, I bought another 7 facilities in areas that were cheaper to buy in, with lower taxes, that were easier to get loans on. I mean, it just, as long as you set up those systems and you have that solid team around you that you can trust, that has the track record and the history, that's how you do it.
I love the way that you just broke that down, Fernando, because it's, and I'm someone who, aside from a recovering perfectionist, I'm also someone who tends to like control of things. And so I can only imagine, had I purchased my very first property living in Barcelona, I would have probably been over there every single day, all day, making sure that everything was exactly the way that I had it in my mind, not necessarily the way that it needed to be to serve the resident that I really want to serve. And so very much like you, I found myself focusing on process versus the property, because I didn't have the leisure of getting on a plane. I couldn't even do 8 hours. It's minimum, right? When we're living in Europe, it's a minimum of 13 hours to get to anywhere I would potentially need to get to. And so having that approach and just the way that you explained it, I'm sure helps so many of the Going Long family also too, to understand, if you're just in your backyard, sometimes that can be a limiting factor for potential growth. And so giving yourself the opportunity to really focus on building the right systems, incorporating the right team that's aligned with your vision, understands the location, has the ecosystem, and all these types of things, then it makes it much easier for you to add additional assets into your portfolio. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm just curious also too, because with the self-storage space in general in the United States, there's a lot of things that are happening in that space. And I'm just curious if you can also help to educate us on, and when we talk about it, it's really the whole concept of consolidation. There's a lot of consolidation that's happening, because even though most people are still looking in more of the habitational type of tangible assets, there are more and more people that are now looking into the self-storage facility, into the self-storage space. So consolidation seems to be the thing that is happening more and more. And just would love your comment on that. And also too, how are you working within this new kind of market dynamic of consolidation within self-storage?
Yeah, it's funny. So I hear this a lot, and it's actually a pretty large misconception. There is consolidation happening, but one of the 9 reasons I left self-storage, number 5, is it is a extremely fragmented market. And as you know, fragmented markets create opportunity. So there's roughly 70,000 self-storage facilities existing in the United States. Only 20% of those are owned by the largest REITs. Then another 9% is owned by the next 100 largest operators. So that means that there's like 69 to 71% of all of the self-storage facilities in the United States owned by these mom and pop operators, that they own one or maybe two self-storage facilities themselves. And that's where I'm able to buy these fantastic deals. One of the reasons we switched from multifamily to self-storage was in the multifamily space. Anytime I'd be competing on a property, I had these big funds competing against me, and they were buying these things at 4 or 5% cap rates. On the self-storage space, I'm buying things consistently between 9 to 12% cap rate. So 2 to 3 times the return on an unleveraged basis that I could gotten for the same amount of dollars in the multifamily space.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's helpful, and I know you've made mention of the list of 9 things, and hopefully we're going to get a chance to learn more about that directly from you, which will be fantastic. So I guess before we get into going along final 3, I'd love to know just kind of what's on your mind, Fernando. What do you see? How many lives are you impacting over the next, I don't know, well, let's say the next 12 months, 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. So our goal as a company at Impact Self-Storage is to impact 100,000 lives. And the way we do that is by acquiring self-storage facilities and then giving back to the local communities that we operate in. Self-storage, unlike, say, multifamily or single family, has a very small trade area. So what I mean by that is, say I'm a tenant that's renting an apartment and my rent goes up, I'm willing to go all the way across town on Chicago, maybe 10, 15, 20 miles to get to another apartment that makes sense for me as far as price-wise goes. With self-storage, our trade areas are anywhere between 1 to 5 miles in radius. That's it. So no one's going to really go an extra 5 miles outside of that trade area to save an extra $5 on a facility, because what they want is that convenience of having their possessions close by to them. So that's our goal, is to make sure that when we buy facilities in these local communities, that we give back. And we do that with either sponsoring little league teams or hockey teams. We work with the local police departments and fire departments for helping anyone that may be a victim of tragedy. Maybe their house burned down and they need a place to store their possessions while they're filing the insurance claim and they're finding another place to live. So we'll actually give units away for free, work with those people. We've done food drives, we've done clothing drives, we've done school supply drives where we'll fill backpacks with school supplies. These are kind of the things that we want to focus on. So yes, our core focus in our niche is self-storage, but the goal is to impact lives. That's why the self-storage company is called Impact Self-Storage. Okay,
fantastic. So see if we can also help you impact those 100,000 lives and do that in a positive way. And speaking of which, and I know I said we'll go into the going along final 3, but you made me think of something else as well. So typically, and you mentioned you got started and you were working, or you were doing things on your own, and now you started to build a team. And as you start to build a team, you're also, one of the things that you're helping to do is helping, in a very similar way as I do, is helping other investors, people that enjoy doing what they do during the day. They are maybe probably tired of Wall Street. I don't know about you, but a lot of the people that invest with me, they're tired of Wall Street. They're just like, I need to do something else. I need more control. I need to know the person that I'm actually speaking to. I don't need to dial a 1-800 number, blah, 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 blah. And so I know that that's an area that is also something that's important for you in terms of being able to work with other investors. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about, like, who is the typical investor that you are helping today, the typical person that you are working with, and how you engage with them, because I think that would be a great thing for the Going Long family to know.
Yeah. So the way that we work with investors, and what our ultimate goal is to provide these investors access to tax advantaged self-storage investments that have a focus on not only wealth growth, but also downside risk mitigation, because that's the most important thing. This is, again, going back to me being as an engineer by training. We always plan for the worst, but hope for the best. And when we're working with these investors, the biggest thing that they're always telling us is kind of the same thing that you said is, I'm tired of Wall Street. There's a lot of manipulation going around. It seems like we've been on a bull run for a long time. This can't go on forever. What's next in store? And, when it comes to timing the market, it's very difficult. So if you all of a sudden have been in there for 30 years and you just happen to be retiring in the next 5-10 years, and then the market dips, and all of a sudden you have to wait another 10, 15 years to get back to where you were before, that could be catastrophic on your retirement funds. So a lot of the investors we're working with are typically accredited. They have kind of professional jobs, professional careers. They don't have a lot of time on their own to do these investments, on their own and build their own team, get the leverage, build the networks. So they come and they leverage us for that.
Okay. Yep. Makes a lot of sense. And so this you're obviously in a place where you will be able to help more and more people and getting closer to that 100,000 number of people of lives that you want to be able to impact, which is great. So, wow, Fernando, you know what the thing is, like I want to keep talking to you forever and ever, man. But the thing is, and I know that the Going Long family wants me to keep talking to you because they're like, oh, gosh, this is awesome. They're writing all this stuff down. They're like, this guy's amazing. But the thing is, we have to get to the Going Long final three. And the thing is, I'm never going to ask any of my guests, and you're one of my guests, the Going Long final three without actually asking you if you're ready. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
I think you were born ready, Fernando. That's just my my thought here. But anyway, so listen. So we started with you in Chicago, Illinois, and so what I'd love to be able to do is bring it back to Europe. And so I think you and I talked. You may have also some European roots as well. So help us understand, what is your favorite European city that you've either visited or is still on your bucket list to visit?
Yeah. So as far as the European city that was my favorite that I visited, I'm going to have to say, this is tough. I loved Paris and it was a great time, but the one that's on my bucket list that I really want to get to is Calabria, Italy, that region. And the reason why is my father, although he is Brazilian, he is 100% Italian because my great grandmother, she left Italy during the war and emigrated to southern Brazil. So I promised him right before the pandemic that I would take him back to Italy. And then obviously we had to push those plans back. So hopefully next year we're going to be able to go back, and I'm going to probably spend 3-4 months in Italy with him.
That would be fantastic. Yeah. And with a last name like Angelucci, it's not a surprise, at least for me, that you would want to go check out. And I have a number of friends from Calabria, so maybe we'll have a conversation as well. Even though your family roots are from there, I'd be happy to connect you with them.
That'd be great.
So there is, that's the first question. The second question is, and it really has to do with successful people. And Fernando, you have obviously done a lot of things. You've had a lot of success events in your life. And one of the things that I've noticed with really successful people is really successful people are successful because they've only made one mistake in their entire trajectory, which is why they get to where... Did I get that wrong again? I think I got that wrong again. Because, I think I did get that wrong again. Don't worry, Fernando. I do that all the time. It's kind of by design. So the thing is, listen, really successful people are just like everybody else. They make lots and lots of mistakes, have lots of learning opportunities, whatever you want to call them, Fernando. But the thing that really successful people do differently, and it's true, is that they take a moment to learn what went wrong or what happened, probably is the best way to state it. And they take away a lesson. So I would love for you to share, from a learning opportunity or a mistake that you made, what is the one lesson that you know would be of great value for the Going Long family to hear from you today?
Yeah. So one of the things, it's funny that you mentioned that. One of the sayings that I always have is, in real estate, there is no such thing as failure. There's just really expensive life lessons that you learn. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that one of my mentors taught me to do was to do what he called postmortems. So anytime a deal went bad, you would sit down with your entire team, usually offsite, spend 4 to maybe 8 hours on that deal and go through every reason why that deal went wrong, and then build a framework as to why they went wrong, how you could have mitigated it, and what did you needed to do in the front end to mitigate that. And then by doing this enough, you start building kind of these processes in place. And instead of doing postmortems, then you start doing pre-mortems on deals. So before you even go into a deal, you kind of do that same strategy session. And then you go ahead and list, okay, what is every reason that this deal could go wrong? How do we mitigate against that? How do we eliminate that? Or how do we offload that risk to another party, like a third-party consultant, a contract, or something like that?
Perfect. So love being able to do that. Appreciate that you share that with us. And that brings us into the Going Long final three, the third of the questions. And that actually has to do with feeding our brains. And I know this is something that's really, really important for you. And so I would love for you to share, what is the one book that you would recommend to the Going Long family?
And one is tough. I have, just in my Audible alone, I probably have 180 books. Right. As far as the book that has made the most impact on my life and the individuals around me, I would have to say it would be Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Because most people look at it and they think it's a book on negotiation, but it's not. It's a book on how to active listen. It's a book on how to foster deep relationships with the people around you and really understand what they're trying to tell you, as opposed to just waiting until they're done talking so that you can respond. You're already starting to formulate your response before they're even done. So that book is probably that one, and Rich Dad Poor Dad are probably the two books that I've given away the most to other individuals.
So being able to give either of those two books away is phenomenal, fantastic. Rich Dad Poor Dad definitely fits a portion of the brain and helps people get along. Chris Voss and Never Split the Difference is definitely one of those. It goes beyond negotiation, as you said, and it really helps to be a much more active listener, so that you can also begin to create and engage on a deeper level with people, because they actually know that you're listening to them, or at least, you know, I love that.
Sure, it's
too.
back there, right?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It definitely is there.
Can I add one more book?
You can over-deliver. Why did I know that was going to happen with you, Fernando? I knew you were going to over-deliver. Go ahead.
So you got Rich Dad Poor Dad, which talks about, Rich Dad Poor Dad talking about the mindset of an investor and a business owner. You have Never Split the Difference about interpersonal relationships, but how about your relationships with yourself and setting up mental models for yourself? So for that section, I would recommend reading Principles by Ray Dalio. Absolutely fantastic book.
It's Mr. Dalio, and he also has a really cool, has nothing to do with Principles, but the 20-minute or 25-minute video that he has on how the economy works is actually a really amazing one as well. Not a book, but education. So perfect. So so you're going to 3 times over deliver, and I'm sure I'll get in trouble from all my previous guests and all that other kind of stuff. But hey, these things happen every once in a while. So Fernando, I can't believe how quickly the time flies, man. And I think about you sharing the story from your very first couple words, son of immigrants from Brazil, and being able to, very quickly be able to transact over $50 million worth of self-storage. But then you even took us back from there to be able to help understand that, well, you had to have a couple difficult conversations in your life, and your parents told you that, hey, listen, you're going to go through the American dream, and well, you know what? You told your dad, and he was like, well, you can either get the blue car or the blue car and be an engineer or be an engineer. And so you did that. And through your 4 years you went through, and you got some experience in terms of being able to build a business, being able to have the building the painting business, and you broke some records. And then even afterwards, you went in and you got into your engineering career. And then a year later, it was time for you to have another conversation with your dad. And it was, hey, look, I need to kind of do something else. He believed in you. And I guess he started really believing in you when he saw a couple of years later that you were writing these cool checks to your equity investors, which was phenomenal. And in the meantime, you started in single family because that's where you needed to start because of capital. And then things started building up, and then you realized that there was a lot going on with the habitational type of real estate. And then at a certain point, you're at this conference and you're walking by, and there's no tenants, no toilets, and no other stuff. And you went to the front row, and you had to go back and tell your team, hey, look, we're going to pivot. We're going to go deep. We're going to focus here, and we're going to become the experts in the self-storage space. And since then, you've continued to, be involved in building business, building communities. And now you're on a goal to really impact 100,000 lives in different states and different locations. And you are open to creating the right processes and building the teams so that you can not only create positive impacts for those investors in those communities where you're a part of, but you're also ultimately impacting their lives positively. So, and you're looking to continue to make that impact. And I know just with that and all the other cool stuff, your great nature and your wonderful smile, that so many people on the Going Long family are thinking, I got to get in touch with Fernando. So Fernando, help us understand, what is the best way for the Going Long family to find out more about you, what you're doing at Impact Storage and also at Titan Wealth Group?
Yeah, you can just go visit our websites. So www.titanwealthgroup.com, or you can go to www.impactselfstorage.com. Very easy to get in contact with us there.
All right. Fantastic. Impact Self Storage, as well as Titan Wealth Group. And you can find out more information about what Fernando and his team are doing. Great websites. Go check them out. I know I've been over there as well. And listen, Fernando, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time, investing it with me and the entire Going Long family. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Billy.
All right, perfect. If you give me just like 2 seconds, or probably like 30 seconds, actually, Fernando, I just want to say some last words to the Going Long family. Look, family, Fernando just left so much value here. It was amazing. Talking about having his focus early on in life and just really going after it and continuing to work to make and impact lives. Now, you know, today's conversation, you know at least 2 or 3 other people that need to hear the message that he left us. So just take your phone out of your pocket, take your iPhone out, and, you know, just share this episode. Share it with 2 or 3 other people. You know that they need to hear it. And since you have your iPhone out already, well, why don't you take a second and leave an honest written review and rating. That's something that I definitely take a lot of pride in reading. I want an honest review. I'd love an honest review. Doesn't have to be 5-star, just an honest review, so that we can continue to make the content here much more relevant. We can continue to attract amazing guests like Fernando, so that you can continue to get exactly what it is that you need, so that you can move forward as part of the Going Long family. So with that, I'm really looking forward to welcoming you back on the very next episode and the very next conversation. So go out, make it a great day, and thank you very much.
Wow, don't you love hearing from top-notch experts in the field? You know, when I was getting started, I really wish that I would have had access to such experts. And even more, I wish they would have given me like a really simple list of things to follow, so that I could have gotten to my goals much faster and been much happier even sooner. So that's why I've created for you the 7 things that you should avoid in order to be successful in long distance investing. And you can pick that up really easily by going to billykeels.com/7 things to avoid. And also, if you liked today's episode, don't forget to leave a 5-star review. I'm looking forward to seeing you on our very next episode, so go out and make it a great day.